Hello everyone, and welcome to week 2 of our open dialogue study. I'm so glad that you're joining with us. I hope that you had the opportunity to practice both the art of apologizing as well as some of the things we talked about how to have a successful conversation. I'm excited this week because we're going to be focusing on the opposite end, where last week we kind of talked about things that we do in the midst of the conversation. This is the reaction to that, and I think it's the easiest way to put that. We're going to be talking about listening. We're going to be talking about how it is that we listen. But before we enter into that, I want to kind of define a little bit what it means to have a successful conversation. And the fact is that every successful conversation at its very core has a free flow of information going back and forth. And as we kind of shared last week in part 2, we said, the one thing that will always stop a conversation is when we try to prove that we're right. And the reason for that is because the information is stopping, right? Where a successful conversation has this free flow back and forth of this is what I think and what do you think and this is my understanding, that's your. All of a sudden when we go from trying to have this free flow of dialogue and information that is going back and forth to I'm right, you have someone right there and they're trying to get information, but it's I'm right, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. And so it stops that. And so in order to have a successful conversation, at the very core, we have to remember that there needs to be a free flow of relevant. And that's important because if someone all of a sudden changes the topic, it's no longer, right? If you're talking about, how to make a perfect key lime pie and someone brings up, oh, well, did you see what so-and-so is wearing? And that conversation, it stopped. There's no longer this free flow of how exactly do you make a key lime pie. And so every successful conversation has a free flow of relevant information. And so that's important. Another thing that's important in the conversation is a lot of times when people react negatively to what you're saying, it's because they're not part of the process, not necessarily that they're against what it is that you're saying. And the reason why this is important is because when people feel left out of the process, when they feel that they have not been able to put in information into the conversation, they're going to react negatively. So if you think about going to a board meeting, or you think about maybe if you've been planning a vacation or a surprise, have you ever planned a surprise for someone and it just goes completely wrong? Right? Like you're planning on going on a date, or you're planning a surprise birthday party, or for something for your spouse or your kids, and it's completely wrong and they hate it and everything. More than likely, they're not upset that you took the time to plan. What they're upset about is the fact that you didn't take the time to get the information for what they would want. You took them to a place where they don't really like the food, and instead of getting the information of, they don't like the food there, you just planned it. They're not upset that you planned a special date. They're upset that you didn't take the time to get the information, that they had no input into it. And the best surprises always take information of what someone's going to enjoy. And so when someone reacts, it's probably because they feel they haven't had a say in the process. And that goes along with listening. If we're not listening, people feel that they don't have skin in the game. And this is what's called the shared pool of information. It's everyone's information in together. And so it's important that we understand how to listen. It's important that we use listening skills and the different types of listening, because this is immediately going to affect not only the free flow of information back and forth, it's also going to affect if someone feels either intentionally or unintentionally that their say has entered into the shared pool of information, right? If you listen to what someone says and you realize they very much value spending time with their family and they very much value this, then when you go to make changes, they're going to feel like their voice is heard because they've overheard it, right? They realize, wow, this person's listened either intentionally or unintentionally to what it is that I'm saying, and it's entered into the shared pool. And so what I want to talk about before we go into how we can listen are the three types of listening that there are. So there are three different types of listening that I want to talk about. The first type of listening is competitive listening. This is when we're listening so that way we can immediately come back with, oh no, that's not what I was saying, right? This is the kind of listening that you tend to see in debates, right? The person in the debate is waiting for the other person to say something so they can refute it, right? And so in competitive listening, what we're doing is we're listening so that way we can say what we want to say. So right now, if you're listening competitively, what you're doing is you're listening for what I'm going to say so that way you can react to it. Well, Pastor Dave, I think that's really good, but here's what I think. That's competitive listening. Competitive listening is when we're listening so that way we can react, so that way we can push our own opinion, so that way we can push our own dialogue, so we can tell the person, look, here's why you're wrong. Here's why, here's what I think. And what competitive listening does is it makes it so we're not focusing on the other person. We're focusing on what we want. We're focusing on what we want to say. And that's not really listening at all. What that is us letting someone speak so that way we can say what we want to say. I can think of several times when this has kind of happened where I'm talking to someone and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to tell them, what I want to say. Or, when you have a question, I think in school, you have a question and you raise your hand and you're trying to focus on the question. So you're sitting there and you're not hearing what the professor's saying while they're talking or what the teacher's saying while they're talking because you have that question. And so competitive listening is when we're so focused on what we want to say or what we want to prove or what we want to do that we are not listening to what the other person says. So that's competitive. It's when we put our priority first. It's where we focus on what it is we want to say. And then there's passive listening. And this is when we're listening, but we're not really listening. So we kind of hear like the wah, 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 Charlie Brown style. And so I might hear that my wife is saying something, but I'm not really hearing what she's saying. Right? I know she's talking about something that's happening on the news. I know, blah, blah, blah. But then I turn around and say, I'm sorry, what was that? What was it that you said? That's passive listening. It's when we're kind of hearing bits and pieces here or there, but we're not really paying attention. I think a lot of times this is when we're multitasking, right? So, we're multitasking, we're doing something, and, we can hear in the background what's going on. Maybe if you like to do a hobby while you're watching TV or a movie or something, and you do it, and you're focused on it, and you can hear what's going on, almost like white noise background in it, but you're not really catching it. My mother-in-law does this all the time. She'll be cooking or she'll be doing something, and she'll watch a movie. And she'll go about and she'll play the movie like 8 or 9 times in one day. And she's like, oh, well, I was doing stuff, so I never really got to watch it and got to see this part or understand this part. That's passive listening. The third way, and the way that is most effective, is active listening. This is when you're listening to what the person says so you can engage. Not so you can make a point, but so you understand what it is that they're saying. So right now, you're listening to what it is I'm saying, and you're trying to figure out, how can I apply that? How can I do that? That's very interesting. And so active listening is the model that we want to use when we're trying to understand and apply what the person is. Not when we're trying to put our say in, not when we're trying to be competitive, not when we're doing something else and passively listening, but active listening is when we're trying to engage with what the person is saying right now. And so there are, I'm going to say 8 steps to active listening. There are 8 steps to active listening, if we want to listen actively. And these are different things that we do that will help us not only convey that we're listening actively, but will actually help us in tone, in manner, and everything to actually actively listen. And so the first thing is we should face the speaker and maintain eye contact. If you remember last week, I shared that very few people actually make eye contact. We live in a society now where most of us, even when we're talking, right, are doing this. Yep. And we might be scrolling, and we might be listening to what someone's saying right now, right? I'm talking to you, but I was actually also reading a message, right? And so, face the speaker, look them in the eye. Look them in the eye. We're so used to social media and everything like that we don't do this. And it's very unsettling when we look someone in the eye. Face the speaker, look them in the eye. That's the first thing that will help us with active listening. The second thing is to be attentive, but be relaxed. If you notice right now, if we were talking face to face, my posture is relaxed, but I'm also attentive. Right? You can see that I am listening and I am waiting to see what it is. So have your body posture relaxed. Don't be like rigid, like, yes, I want to hear what you're talking. Be relaxed. Be in a, you can't see it right now, but my legs are crossed. I am in a relaxed position. But be attentive. Be attentive to what is happening. I noticed my camera just lagged for some reason, and I'm not quite sure why. So just give me 1 second. Alright, sorry about that. So be relaxed and be attentive. Have your body posture leaning forward, maybe a little bit, eye contact. The third thing that we can do is keep an open mind. Remember, a conversation is about free flow. So when we're not talking, when we're listening, we need to keep an open mind that this person's perspective might be different. We don't want to be closed off. Keep an open mind to what is being said. The fourth thing is we want to listen to the words and try to picture what the speaker is saying. This is kind of a little bit more putting yourself into it. So listen to the words that they're saying and picture it. If they're telling a story, try to picture the story and what emotions and things. This is going to help us kind of submerge a little bit more. If they're sharing information, try to picture how you would respond or how you could imagine that. Number 5, don't interrupt and don't impose your solution. Let me tell you, this is a huge one for active listening. Don't interrupt what the person's saying. That proves, again, that you are in this competitive or this combative listening mode. It doesn't prove an active listening mode. You don't want to interrupt. Let them finish what they're saying. And if you're not sure if they're done, be like, is that what you wanted? It's not rude. It might seem a little bit, but was that all? I found that very interesting. Kind of tag in there. And don't impose your solution. One of the things that Olivia and I do is if she has a problem and she just wants me to listen, right? We'll have this, okay. And then I'll say, are you done? And are you done means that I can now put in solutions, or I can try to solve the problem. But anytime before that, when she says, I just want you to listen, I don't. Because if we're trying to solve solutions and we're trying to impose our solutions, we're no longer listening, right? We've entered in that combative, like, here's what you need to do, here's the thing. So don't try to impose your solutions. That's number 5. Number 6 is wait for the speaker to pause before you ask a clarifying question. This is not changing what it is that they're saying. It's asking, could you please clarify that? And so wait until they pause and then be like, I'm sorry, could you please clarify that? This is different than interrupting. Interrupting is this sense of, you're trying to change, or, you're again, putting your things. If you don't understand, you wait for a pause. Could you please clarify on that? And just enter that. So that way they can clarify, and that way you can follow along again with what they're saying. So number 6 is wait for the speaker to pause and ask clarifying questions. Number 7 is ask questions only to ensure understanding. Any question that you ask is to ensure that you are understanding them correctly. It's not to put them on the offensive. It's not to debate with them. It's nothing like that. It is to make sure that you are ensuring your understanding of what they're saying. And this is all adding into that shared pool of information. And the last thing is try to feel what the speaker's feeling. Right? If they're sharing something with you, try to imagine how they felt in that situation, or try to imagine how they're feeling now. It will help you to be able to sympathize with them and to understand the risk that they took. And so, again, we want to be actively listening. We need to understand that when we have that every successful conversation is about a flow of relevant information, which means when the person is speaking, that we are listening, because the way to keep things going is to be by listening. So that way we ask relevant questions and we have relevant information going back and forth between all the parties. We need to remember that a lot of times when people are against something that you have, more than often it's against the fact that they've been left out of the process, and they want to know why it is that that you've reached this conclusion or that you've done this. And we need to help add to the shared pool of information. We need to make sure we're doing active listening, and there are 8 steps to active listening that we should try to practice. The first is that we should face the speaker and maintain eye contact. The second is our body posture should be relaxed and attentive. Our third is we need to make sure we keep an open mind while they're talking. Fourthly, we need to listen to the words and picture what it is that the speaker is saying. 5, don't interrupt to impose your own solution. 6, wait for the speaker to pause to ask clarifying questions. 7, only ask questions that ensure a deeper understanding of what it is that the speaker is saying. And 8, try and feel what the speaker is feeling. These are the steps that will help us to be able to listen. And we've already talked about the starting points and apologies and things like that. But if we actually take the moment to actively listen, our conversations will change. I can guarantee you, having applied these to my life, that people will appreciate having conversations with you more, and you'll get more out of the conversations you have by applying these active listenings. I hope that as you go through your week that you will apply these things and that you will start to see how your conversation has changed. Thanks for joining, and I hope to see you next time.